Hello, and welcome to the Creative Writing Live podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today is author Daniel Sheley. We're going to be talking to him about his new award-winning book, The Soul Song. Daniel, welcome to the Creative Writing Live podcast.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you here. And for those who are familiar with the show, we like to start things off talking about things that we have read or watched in the recent past. I'll go first just to give Daniel a little time to collect his thoughts. So I've got three films that we watched recently. Well, two of them watched with my wife, one I watched on my own. The one I watched on my own is a German superhero film called Freaks, You're One of Us, and that's on Netflix. It's kind of like a very low budget independent film, but it involves this woman who kind of discovers that she's got super strength, and it takes it from there. It's fun, it's kind of silly, and it's got a couple of surprising twists, so that was enjoyable. And then we went to see a really enjoyable film called The Sheep Detectives, which is kind of there's a great concept that there's this shepherd who reads mystery stories to his flock of sheep, and then he is mysteriously killed, and the sheep set out to solve who did it. And then the sheep talk, but not to, the sheep talk amongst themselves, not to people. But it was a lot of fun and a great mystery. And if you get this chance to go see it, go see it. That was a lot of fun. And last time I talked about watching this movie from 1938 called Nancy Drew Detective. And so we watched the sequel, which was called Nancy Drew Reporter, which was equally, fun and kind of charming, but not as enjoyable. And the ending was just terrible. And I'm just going to leave it at that. It's just kind of like the writer decided, that's good enough, and just left it at that. So, uh, that is it for me. So, Daniel, what about you? Anything good or recommendations for reading or watching?
So, for reading lately, everyone has been reading this book, and all my friends and all fellow authors have been telling me that I need to dive into it, and it's Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Ah,
So,
okay.
I'm on book two right now. I'm a little behind everyone else, but between writing when I can and reading that's got most of my attention. However, my wife and I have been watching Alex Rider. It's based off of a book series that I started back in the early 2000s and just never finished. But we started watching it together, and it's pretty cool. It's about a kid who becomes a spy after his uncle's passing. Only he doesn't want to be a spy, but he was like secretly trained by his uncle the entire time. So he has all the training he needs to be a spy without having to go through the whole training montage.
Hmm.
So there's that. And then with the kids, lately we watched the movie Swapped. Really cute movie, but about uh, fictional creatures that can change into other things, and um, it has a nice story at the end. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but definitely worth a watch if you have kids.
Okay, that sounds great. I have heard of what is it, Dungeon Crawler Carl? Is that kind of like a tongue-in-cheek version of D&D type of thing? Oh, he's got the book right there. For those who are watching, he's got the book. Oh, it's a hardback.
Yeah, Dungeon Crawler Carl. It is a lit RPG adventure that yeah, I finished this book already. But yeah,
Wow.
it's really good read.
Okay, sounds great. He was always up for a good. I guess it sounds very comedic. I guess just with a name like Dungeon Crawler Carl.
It's got trauma moments, but it is very funny. There's a lot of humor in it. Matt Denneman did a great job.
Excellent, fantastic. Well, enough about that guy. We're going to talk about Daniel Sheley and his book, The Soul Song. And I like to read the about the author, which is on the back cover. Daniel Sheley is the author of The Soul Song, For Scales Alone, Heartcoil, and Lux Mendacium. Is that right?
Mendicium.
Mendicium.
It's Latin.
Okay, okay. That was not my language. His writing explores mythic fantasy through the lenses of memory, choice, and transformation. A U.S. Navy veteran, Daniel lives in Midland, Texas with his family. When not writing, he continues to pursue storytelling through art and music, drawn to the spaces where myth and meaning intersect. And we could definitely get into that because, as you can see, for those who've got the video version, there is a dragon on the cover, and you can't go wrong with a story that involves a dragon as a character. So, Daniel, let's talk a little bit about you before we get into the book itself. myself. So, how did you get your start? Were you always a writer? Were you a voracious reader as a child? I mean, what was it that created writer Daniel Sheley?
So I have always been a voracious reader as a child, especially. Um, I didn't have like I couldn't do a lot of things in the neighborhood that I grew up with in without getting myself in trouble. So I gravitated towards reading books, and then I found myself like walking to libraries, no matter how far, uphill, both ways in the snow, 5 miles, just so I could get my hands on books, and I'd take them home and read them. Janny Wirtz, Robert Jordan, Thomas Mallory, anything I could get, sink my hands into and read. And eventually I ran out of books to read. So it was a small library, a lovely library, but it was a small library. So I had to find something else to do. And I said, you know what? I'll write my own book. So I wrote a book at the age of 16 called The Last Bastion, which had never been published and probably never will be. But I used to carry that red binder everywhere. And then I got into poetry writing, and all through college, I would write like 1 to 2 poems a night and gave them off to various people, sometimes those who I had interest in at the moment. uh, yeah, it's kind of stalled out from there. And then I picked back up writing around 2015 when a good friend of mine who I went to high school with, Laura Lee Anderson, uh, who is a traditional published author herself, she and I got to talking online just after she had published her book. And I was talking about my poetry, and she said that I needed to start writing again. Uh, and that encouragement made me start branching out and trying to do short stories again. I submitted a few. They didn't really go anywhere, um, but I kept them. And then I started writing books again. Slowly and steadily over time, I built up a small backlist. And it was one night I was sitting there. I had just finished writing Lux Mendicium. And I told my wife, that's it, I finished it. And she said, publish it. I never thought about publishing any of my work. Uh, but I took her at her word and I looked up how to publish it on KDP, published the book, and immediately I was elated. About a week later, I regretted it because I didn't really edit it.
Oh, wow.
It led me into the whole, okay, the publishing and learning how to market and all that. That came later, but the writing has always been there. Sorry, that's a long answer for what you
Oh,
asked.
no. No, that's perfectly fine. I was going to say, was it kind of like, I guess, well, I wanted to ask you, so The Last Bastion, your first book, you said no one's ever going to see that, so that is like locked away and never to see the light of day again.
Well, I might rewrite it and publish it. It has a decent story, but it's like a very supernatural dealing with angels and demons
Oh, okay.
and the gray areas in between. So I'm like, eh.
Well, I was going to say, is that like your version of like really lousy teenage poetry type of thing?
Well, no, it was my teenage version of Supernatural before Supernatural existed.
Ah, okay. Got it. Got it. Okay, so then with your book that you self-published, was that kind of like, I guess, flying by the seat of your pants, kind of like in trial by error, just like and just kind of learning from your mistakes? Okay, I'll do better for the next one. Do you still self-publish, or are you working with a publisher now?
I created Ashway Press, which is my own press. Me and my wife both worked on funding it.
Hmm.
So I publish through that name and that press, but it's still indie publishing. I'm the only author for my press.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Uh, before we get into talking about the Soul Song, I was looking at some of your other books on your website, which incidentally, danielsheleyauthor.com, that a lot of them tend to lean into the fantasy genre. And I'd be like, and I mean, Hardcoil to me looks a little more steampunkish, just because there's like a robot figure on the cover. What is it about working in that genre that really appeals to you? Because I mean, that is like you're really implanted in that kind of world.
Well, first, I've always loved speculative fiction. If you look at the authors that I mentioned,
Hmm.
Jenny Worth, Robert Jordan, Anne McCaffrey, Thomas Mallory, it all has like a fantasy element to it. But why do I write fantasy is more along the lines of I could sit there and tell you about all the problems that this world has. I could give you a list a mile long of issues that we all face every day and natural things like greed and lust that people fall into and the idea for power grabbing. But I'd be beating you over the head with a stick. And nobody wants to be beat over the head with a stick. So I use metaphor. I use fantasy as a metaphor to deal with real human issues. So all of my stories they stem from the human element. We're in the viewpoint of real people, and they're going through this world that is just messed up in various different ways. They're not all the same, and they have to deal with various different issues. Like Four Scales alone, Jed is a kobold, um, and his I don't want to give away anything, but he has to deal with a lot of people looking down on just what I apologize. Uh, he has to deal with people looking down on him just because of what his race or species is,
Hmm.
and that drives a lot of the beginning parts of the story. And it deals a lot with systemic issues that plague us everywhere.
Hmm.
But now when you're written through a fantasy lens, you can see it better. And in the Soul Song, we have a lot of those. I tried to focus on change as the main thing, but you get the view of change from eight different characters.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
yeah. I was going to say I had a note about that, but before we get into that, let us actually talk about your book, The Soul Song. I like to ask the guest for screenwriting. It's the elevator pitch. Like, here's the story in 5 seconds. For authors, you need a little more time. So, like, I like to call it, what's the cocktail party pitch? Give me the log line for the book, so people get an idea of like what is the core of this story.
okay. My wife tells me keep this simple. So,
Sure, sure.
uh, Dragon passes an ancient power to a boy that he wants nothing to do with, and he has to now navigate his way through the world, making his own decisions and choices, which have the ability to alter the entire planet world itself, all while being chased by another dragon that wants him dead. And he gets mixed up in a political affairs
Hmm.
of the biggest local village in the area.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty well. I mean, I did read it, and okay, before we get into the very unique approach of not really multiple protagonists, but multiple POVs, what was the inspiration for this story? I mean, you said you're a big fan of writing with fantasy as a metaphor. What was it that was, I guess, the inspiration for like, okay, I want a story about a dragon. How can I do this? That's like a unique approach to telling that kind of story.
So what happened for the Soul Song is late one night while I was working third shift, um, an idea for a story just came to me. Like it was a so I grabbed a printout paper because I was working for like a uh, what was it? An internet provider, internet service. So I grabbed like a printout paper, flapped it over backwards, and I wrote by hand a short story
Hmm.
called Stargazer. And it's roughly it's pretty much almost the entire first chapter of the book with a lot of things changed. And that was beginning. And then like Kara's character in the short story was a baby, but then I altered her to be an adult intentionally so I could explore more change with her in the upcoming books. But the idea just it fell upon me. I was
Hmm.
just working and I said, you know what? I'm going to write this short story. And I started writing it down.
That's great. That's great. So you referenced this before, and so I guess this is the thing that I noticed first. We'll get to the second thing in just a second. So the book is told from the perspective of, you said, from eight different characters, with each character getting a few chapters along the way to, I guess, spotlight their story, but also to advance the plot. And it gives their perspective on the events overall of the book, which I thought was really clever. So why did you take that approach as opposed to just a straightforward, linear form of storytelling?
Right. So everyone has their own story.
Hmm.
Everyone has their own truths. And the truth usually lies somewhere in between what he said and she said and what you know. So in order to really like get the full aspect of what is going on in this world, and to give us a look at how change affects every single person and their own views on it, I went with the multi effect. Also, I found that a lot of times villains, especially in a lot of the classical fantasy, they're just mentioned as the big bad. This
Mm.
name, no, no offense, Terry Brooks, but but they're mentioned as this big bad thing, and they send all these minions after them, and they have to constantly. We never really get their side of the story. And so when I write the antagonists, I want I want their logic to be known. I want you to understand where they're coming from because nobody wakes up one morning and says, "You know what? I'm going to be the villain. I'm going to be just be I'm just going to be a villain." Everyone follows their own beliefs, and because of their own ideologies and beliefs, is how they get trapped in these situations where they can be the antagonists, but they don't believe they are.
Right, because in so many stories, in practically every story, the villain or the antagonist, they to them what they are doing, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Even if it goes against, the moral code of the world of the other characters, everyone else thinks, "Oh, you're a terrible person." He says, "No, no, I'm doing this, for your benefit."
Yeah, like Faradin in the book, he just wants to control. Well, it sounds like a bad thing. Yes, he wants to control, but he wants to control the outcome of things so that everything follows an orderly status.
Mhm.
Right?
Right, right, yeah.
That sounds reasonable. It's just how he goes about it.
Well, and that's what creates conflict, which is what stories need. So the other detail that I thought was really unique, I don't think I'd really seen this much before, if at all, was that dialogue is kept to a minimum throughout the book. There is a lot of the story presented via action, but also uh, the I don't want to call it the internal dialogue of the characters, but what they're thinking and why they're doing things. And I just thought that was really unique. It's almost like it's a 75% action, 25% dialogue. Because there are some chapters where there's maybe like a 10 or 12 page chapter, and there's maybe like three lines of dialogue, which I thought was a really unique approach. And I'm very curious, is that the way you write, or is that just the way you wanted to approach this story? Or is there a
That
third version?
that is a side effect of me thinking of interiority first and not really thinking so much about um, communication. I myself have AUDHD, so I live a lot of times in my own head,
Hmm.
and it takes a lot for me to communicate. I'm communicating well today, but it takes a lot for me to just spit out what I'm thinking sometimes.
Hmm.
But in the side effect of it is that I had very little dialogue in the Soul Song, which when I was writing the Severed Chord, which by the way, it's already in its second draft, the sequel to this.
Aha.
Um, when I was writing that, I made it a point to make sure that I focused on adding more dialogue to the story. Um, it was a side effect. Early writers mistake, I guess.
Well, I was going to ask, did other people comment on that? Did other people notice, like, the characters don't really talk that much?
Well, one of my friends and my beta reader, Dusty Sanders, who's also a author herself, she mentioned that she loved it, but wished there had been more dialogue.
Ah.
And when I was going through and doing my editing for like the ninth time, I said to myself, I didn't put much dialogue in this. So yeah, it was. an afterthought. So before I started the Severed Cord, I wrote a lot of short stories to get the muscles working
Oh, okay.
for doing dialogue back and forth. And so the second book has a lot more. I like what I did with the first book, but uh, going forward, I'm working on adding more character dialogue.
Okay, that's really good. I like the idea of the building the dialogue muscle with practicing with short stories. That's a great concept. It is obvious reading this that you put a lot of effort and thought into creating the world of the story. Now, was it challenging for you to do that? And were you also trying to deliberately avoid comparisons to, more well-known and established works? You don't want to say, "Oh, this is just a ripoff of Lord of the Rings," or I don't know, Dragon Riders of Pern, just to pick a name out of the air. Was it something like, was it more challenging to create this unique take on a world that a lot of people are familiar with?
Yes and no. So if you noticed in the book, I don't use the word dragons.
You do not.
Um, I call them draken, which is the Old English word for dragons, by the way, um, or drake, which multiple is draken. But uh, that was one thing. I refuse to use the word dragon the entire book, despite that being what they are, because dragons, in our mind, we think of big monsters, creatures that just destroy everything or hoard gold, or and I wanted mine to have more of a culture. Like think Shannon, what is it? Prairie of the Orange Tree, where the dragons actually have their own culture and their own politics.
Hmm.
So really wanted that. And then I was like, okay, well, there's enough medieval books about dragons. So I took it back further to like the Bronze Age with little mixed in details. And I said, okay, well, why would it be back so far after hundreds of years? Because they can't change. And I
Hmm.
just kept going from there. And I have a habit of if I introduce something, I have to build out the cause of why it exists in the first place.
Okay.
And it in this builds a kind of mythological lore in the background. And then I'll just seep that lore into the story as I go, trying not to just do a whole drop on a page.
So you deliberately create like a backstory for all these different aspects of the world and the characters, and then you try to incorporate it at a reasonable level over the course of the
Yes.
story, rather than just here's a chapter about dragons, which are not called dragons in this world.
Yeah, exactly. So I just introduced it slowly. But I wasn't trying not to be like any author in particular. As a matter of fact, I leaned on some of the authors that I've read in the past, like Bernard Cromwell from The Winter King, and The Last Kingdom. The way he writes, like the actual how things happen, how
Hmm.
people operate. Um, and Edgar Allan Poe, loved Poe. He's who I learned how to do atmosphere from. So I played with his atmospheric tricks with short stories, and that seeps throughout the entire story. But I wasn't trying to not be like anyone in particular. I was just being myself, but really trying to use my influences to
Hmm.
guide me.
Okay, I love that. I also noticed that a lot of the writing, it utilizes, I guess the best way to describe it is which sense is this? Like of the five senses that, you go into not excessive detail, but you include like what something tastes like that somebody's eating, or what color hair this character has, or there's a lot of references to smells, which I thought was a very unique take. Was that also intentional to really put us into the middle of this world, or is that more just your writing style is to include, like you feel the coldness of the stone, or the wetness, the humidity of the fog that's in the morning type of thing.
So this falls back to my AUDHD again. Um, when I'm writing, I see and I feel and I can hear the entire world around me. It drives my wife nuts because I'll be sitting right next to her, but I'm not here. I'm somewhere else. I'm wherever I'm in Veritas. So I can hear and see and smell and taste everything I'm writing about I could tell you how pungent something is.
Hmm.
But so when I write it, I I want the reader to be able to see this world that I'm out currently sitting in. Um, and so it was intentional to make sure that I put those in because I talked about this at my world building speech at Pages and Tumbleweeds. If you have just a plot and a character walks through it, like a girl wakes up one morning, she goes, realizes her father's missing, and she's going to go find him. Cool, not much there. But if we watch everything through her eyes, that's not what we see. We see that she wakes up. We see what the light is like outside. We see what her room looks like as she scans around it. Everything that the reader sees comes from the character's point of view. So if the character picks up a dry cookie that is crumbles in her mouth and makes it feel like she just swallowed stones,
Hmm.
then write about it. Let the reader see it. Let the reader taste that cookie. Um, if you hear buzzing of insects, that's atmosphere. Build it in. Let everyone realize because what it's doing is it's drawing you into the immersion of the story, or at least that's what I tried to
Yeah, well, what I noticed is that maybe this just took you time to develop that particular skill, but you do that, writing to the senses, but you also don't overdo it. You don't overstay the welcome. You don't go into way too much detail. Like it's a dry cookie.
Yeah.
You're not like it's dry because it was overbaked and she put in too much baking soda. That sort of thing. That it's just the right amount that we get what it is you're trying to say, but then you also keep going. You don't linger. And is that something that it just took you time to develop? Because you said you base it on what you want the reader to experience. That do you think, okay, that's enough? I can move on to this next thing, or here's what happens next in the scene.
Well, you know the cookie's dry. You don't need to know why it's dry. You wouldn't care. You just bite the cookie and oh, this is horrid. Just throw it out. But so unless the extra details are needed
Hmm.
for something later on, there's no point lingering on them. Move on. The person wouldn't stop and linger. They wouldn't think, oh, well, they should have cooked this longer or they cooked this too long. They think, oh, this is a bad cookie, and then they move on. So that's what I tried to do with writing. Just keep it in the character's shoes. What would the character do? What would a real person do in this situation?
Okay. No, I totally get that, and you'd have that a lot throughout the course of the story of the book, The Soul Song. And we are talking today with Daniel Sheley. You said that the story just kind of came to you and wrote down what eventually became more or less the first chapter. Was the overall story in place from the outset, or did it take you time to map things out? Like, did you know what the ending was going to be when you started?
Um, Not when I started. No. Like I said, it started as a short story that had a nice beginning and end. When I went to decide to turn it into a novel, I ended up deciding to turn it into a trilogy because I kept adding things. I said, "Oh, okay. Well, this would be cool from here to here, but um, we need more. This is a world. This isn't just one character's view." So then I started adding more characters and said, well, wouldn't it be cool if I did this? So before I even started the first book, I already know the how the entire trilogy ends from beginning to end. The second book is now written, and the third one I've started laying out my skeleton work for.
Hmm.
So when I first started with the making it into a novel, I sat down and I did a lot of thinking and plotting and planning, and a lot of it looks like chicken scratch, but
Hmm.
it was planned with leaving space because I'm not a plotter and I'm not a pantser.
Hmm.
I'm a plantser.
Can you elaborate on that one a little bit? Because I was going to ask about outlining, but if so, is it you just kind of like come up like you have a basic idea and then you just kind of take it and run with it, or is it something totally
so uh,
different?
so first I plot out the characters. So I know how every single character is. I need to know my character to know how the story is going to work. If I don't know my character, I don't know how they'd act. If I don't know how they'd act, I don't know how to write. So
Hmm.
I need to know my characters inside and out. Um, who is this character? And then I need to know the events that need to take place. So I plot out, okay, this event needs to happen here, this event needs to happen here, this event needs to happen here. And then once I know my characters, I know the major events, and I know my basic world rules. Now I can begin writing. And then when I begin writing there, I'm writing to the events from the character's point of view. So
Hmm.
I'm pantsing that as the character.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got it.
So
That does
planting.
help clarify it a bit. Were there times while you're writing it that maybe something like a subplot or a storyline just it wasn't clicking for you? You're just thinking, there's something not right about this. Were there times where you have to go back and trying to find out where did things start to go? No, I don't want to say go wrong, but where did things just start to go in a direction that I did not want it to go? And what
Oh,
is your way of fixing that? Do you just kind of like put it aside for the time being? Or I guess, but because of, the book has so many subplots that are intertwined that you can't remove one block and not have everything else collapse. So, what was your method for approaching something that, okay, something is just not clicking for me with this?
so there was a couple times. It was early in the book without giving anything away. Uh, I got to roughly around chapter 14 three times. And all three times I deleted, well, didn't delete exactly because I kept it off, but I started back over. I said, no, no, I got to change this. This is not working right. And a lot of it had to do with the way that Denny meets Kaylar. Like I knew I needed the two of them to meet, but how I was going to do it
Hmm.
and have it seem natural and within the characters. Oh, it drove me crazy because in the first couple iterations, Leori was there, and I was like, well, no, that's not going to work. I need to get rid of Leori. So it's uh because I needed it to be not quite. It's not a love at first sight type thing,
Hmm.
but there's a connection. Some people they'll meet someone, they'll immediately say, "Oh, I like this person," but it's not a love type thing. It's more of a I feel connection, and I needed that connection to grow throughout the story. And then I gotta be careful how much I say without giving things away.
Sure,
But
sure.
but I needed that connection to grow throughout the story, and Leori's part uh, plays as a counter to it because that's part of that whole weave I built, and just maintaining the weave of all eight characters, and then one side character, Alec, so that everything just kept moving and kept the plot going without causing any knots to tie. Uh, that in itself was what I consider my greatest achievement and my biggest headache.
I totally get that. One of the things I also didn't realize until I was at least a few chapters in, because you are the one who created this world, so there are a lot of phrases and names for things in particular that I was like, did I miss like what exactly that's supposed to be? And so then I'm just reading, and then I think I just inadvertently like went to the back of the book to see, okay, how many pages is this again? And there's a glossary. And like I was like, why did I not know that in the beginning? Uh, was this approach? Did you want to take this approach to and have a glossary in the book rather than, you know, as we were talking before about the whole, the world building. Did you want to Did you want to have a glossary rather than incorporate the terms into the story? Because I guess, from my perspective, it would seem almost forced that, oh, the Vame, well, that's the, like,
Yeah,
and like this very forced explanation that are very expository kind of dialogue.
yeah. I didn't want expository dialogue, but I'll be honest, the glossary was an afterthought. It was actually my wife's idea.
Ah,
She reads a lot of my work, and she said you need a glossary. And I was like, yeah, but and then one of my art readers had mentioned it to me as well. I said, okay, fine, I'll make a glossary.
well, I will say
So,
it did help explain a few things because there were a few things that I wasn't entirely sure what this thing in particular was supposed to be. I mean, I had a general concept, but not a firm grasp. And I think
Uh,
having the glossary, it helped clear things up a little bit. That for my reading of it.
was it the them threads?
Yeah, I because I thought it was the Veym. It's a Veym, I think it.
Yeah, it a lot of people say vein. I didn't actually put a pronunciation in there.
You
To
did not.
me, internally, it's them, and I didn't put a pronunciation guide for it intentionally. And there's a reason for this. When I was younger growing up, I would read names and I didn't look at the pronunciation for them. So to me, those names always were in my head and in my mind how I interpret them. And it made it easier for me to flow through the book than
Hmm.
trying to correct my own brain's way of reading this name to how it was supposed to be expected to be read by someone else. Um, like, for example, Perrin Ayabara is the name of a character in George R. R. Martin's series, The Wheel of Time. And for just for simplicity's sake, when I read through, it was Perrin Ibera. And it stayed that way forever. And it just helped me stay immersed and not trying to fight to match the pronunciation of the author.
Okay. No, I totally get that. Okay, so you already talked. We'll get to the sequel that's in works, and the book we're talking about right now is The Soul Song. But what has been the reaction? I mean, the feedback from the reading public so far.
So far, the reading public has loved it. I've got 40, 40 ratings on Goodreads, sitting at around 4.68, I think was the last time I checked it. 22 on Amazon, sitting at a 4.9, and it won a Literary Titan Gold Book Award, 5 stars from Literary Titan, as well as 5 stars must read from Reti Discoveries Megan Weiss.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Congratulations on that. Okay, so you don't have to go into spoilers or give too much away, but so it sounds like the next book, so it's a trilogy that's in work. So this was book one, and so book two is in the editing phase now.
Book two is currently with my beta reader.
Ah, okay.
Um, and she is working through it. Once it gets back to me, I have whatever she found, which I know she already found one typo that I'll have to fix, and then I'm going to be getting with an editor after I fix whatever she found to go through and give it the old rip apart.
Be brutally
um,
honest and brace yourself for what they say.
yeah, but it's always good. Like Gordon Long was my editor for that one, and he helped me in my craft a lot with telling me some issues that I had in the original draft of it, and he also taught me ways of looking at my own editing. And after I was done with my passes with him, he said, "Hey, I think you need to go back and fix this part. I'm worried about this." So I almost did a full rewrite of some of the first couple pages of the rewrite, and he said, "Looks good," and I just went with it because editors are busy. You don't want to sit there and just keep throwing them stuff after they've
Hmm.
already done their 3 passes at you. So yeah, that's where that one is. Once the severed cord is edited, Sarah Scholl has already agreed to do the cover for it again, and I'll have a release date.
Okay, well, that is fantastic. Because of your experience, not just as a writer, but also in self-publishing and now working with, editors, what advice do you have for writers? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to just be for writing in the fantasy genre, but I mean, advice for authors who are looking like, hey, I want to try publishing my own stuff. I mean, you can address both if you want, or if there's like something like here are the things that really helped me, the the ones that like the biggest lessons I learned from self-publishing, or if you want to write fantasy, or what have you.
Um, I learned a lot of things the hard way early on. So the biggest advice I can give: find a local writing group.
Hmm.
Find fellow authors around you if you can. I happen to be blessed. we have our own author group called the Scribes. We actually all met by chance one day at another author signing, and we started talking and we put together our group, and we all help each other out. Like if you don't know how to do this or you're worried about this, um, Dusty is reading my book. She's another author. She's now beta reading for me. So my advice: join fellow authors, join others who have done this and walked this path, because I can't tell you the headaches you'll get from Instagram. No, sorry, Instagram from Ingram Spark for your covers, for getting your covers lined up right and with the bleeds and getting it to be accepted. It is a challenge, so
Mm,
to speak. And finding editors is not. Sure, you can go on Fiverr, you can go on Reedsy, you can go to all these places that offer authors, but until you actually work with them, you don't know how they're going to work with your stuff.
hmm
So talking to other authors will help you there. There's some that will charge $4,000 to $5,000 for a book to be edited, which, granted, these are pro editors. They're worth their penny, but that may not be in your budget.
Yeah.
So you got to vet the editors who are in your budget and try to offset some of those costs, like developmental editing. Get a beta reader, get an alpha reader.
Yeah, I totally understand that because when I published a trilogy of books a couple of years ago. And when I started it, I tried to do it myself, and it was just a disaster. And I just kind of was talking about it in a writing group that I happened to belong to at the time. And one of the other members of it, she said, "Oh, well, I'm a published author because I've published my own, at least, eight of my own books before." And I'm happy to help. I said, "Oh my, thank God you're here," because she was a godsend. She really took control of all of it, and I have result. I have three fantastic looking books that I'm really proud of, and that would not have been accomplished without her handling the editing and really holding my hand through the whole process of publishing it myself. So yeah, if you are able to find a local writing group, fantastic. But if you're able to find an editor slash experienced publisher, even better. That is great stuff. Daniel, again, we are talking about your book, The Soul Song. Where can people find out more about you and your other books that you have written?
You can find out more about me and my other books from, I have an Amazon bio, Daniel Sheley on Amazon. I've also got my own author page, which is danielsheleyauthor.com. I need to update it, but I post things on there regularly, and I do have an active blog that I run on there. I'm also highly active on Instagram, posting all of my updates there, and you can find out more about me on Goodreads.
Okay, that is fantastic stuff. Daniel Sheley, thank you so much for being here today. And again, your book is The Soul Song. If you like fantasy, if you like dragons, if you like multiple POVs in your story, then this is definitely the book for you. Daniel, thank you so much for being here today.
It was my pleasure.
Excellent. And viewers and listeners, if you had a pleasurable time and enjoyed today's show, please hit like. Feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. I'd like to say for the audio portion of this show, the theme music is by Mark Gunyon. And for my social media, you can check out my screenwriting blog, MaximumZ.blog. This show is on Blue Sky at Podcast CWL. I'm still working on setting up the Instagram account, which will also be Podcast CWL. For my Blue Sky and Instagram, those are at Pez Screenwriting. And like I was just talking about, my Go Ahead and Ask books, all three of them are available on Amazon. Like I said, that's Daniel. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.